I'm gonna,
I wish my browser would remember that I am allowing it.
I know, right? I don't know why it does that for you every single time. I
Yeah.
don't, and I never know. Well, let's start over with good morning, Stefan.
Yeah, just for the just for the edit. Good morning, Jaimee.
Oh man, it's so funny because yeah, like the tech side of things is always the, I don't know, the mystery, I guess, of this whole thing.
Yeah, and
Unconstrained.
what's funny is no matter how many years we have worked in the tech industry and have solved so many problems, the mystery of some applications, some apps, and how they're designed and the dialogues, it's still sometimes, well, that's just it. It is a mystery.
Yeah, I think, oh man, boy, that starts like a whole almost like an interesting thread too, right? Like I mean, we so often, so like as interface designers, like would look at what exists and sometimes you use that as your starting framework, right?
Yeah.
And instead of just throwing it away and starting from scratch, which is probably the better approach, like so often people who are doing things, they're like, well, this exists, but it's broken in this way, this way, and this way. So let's start with what works and then build on that rather than let's throw everything away and start from the ground up and rebuild it the way it should be rebuilt,
Yes.
And I feel like as humans we do that too often. We rely on what exists rather than just starting fresh.
Yeah, I mean, it is well, that's funny. That just brings up uh, my my pal and the founding partner of Where Next, Greg, was here this weekend, and we had some business to attend to on Thursday. But then the rest of the weekend, I rented a cabin up in the mountains, and then um, we headed up. Well, we headed up to Lake Wenatchee, which is on the east side of the Cascades. It is beautiful there right now, although the mosquitoes are ferocious.
Oh man.
The rains, because it's normally very arid, the rains out there, it's all the reservoirs are full. It's beautiful in eastern Washington,
Wow.
and the risk of forest fire is very low, which is makes all of us very happy. But the mosquitoes were vicious.
Oh wow.
I mean, like, you
Yeah.
stop your car and they surround the car. And
Oh.
I haven't, I haven't had mosquito attacks this vicious since I was in the Canadian Arctic.
Oh
But at any
wow.
rate, that's another story.
Wow.
I'm still itching, and I still have swollen, itchy joints. But Greg was here, and we were going through a lot of old memories, and I had a box of photos, and I just thought, and he went through it, and he goes, these are just photos of old girlfriends and high school this and that, and he just kept a few of them, and the rest he just threw away. And I marveled at how clear he was on just letting that stuff go. And even those things, right? I mean, those memories in a way create a framework that in some ways we are bound to, in the same way when we do these digital design projects, right? When we're designing a user experience, if you stick with the original framework, it limits you.
It does, absolutely. And that's so often, oh man, I just feel like somehow our conversations always kick off in the most interesting way. And it's like, I feel like since our last conversation, I've had a couple, I do my little coffee doodles. I try to do them 5 days a week. And like the
Yeah.
one today, for example, was very much that theme. And I didn't really expect, I don't know. I don't really walk into this conversation with a certain expectation.
Yeah.
But it's funny how it just seems to like go in that direction. I don't know. It's interesting. I guess it's interesting that you've had similar conversations and thoughts, even though, you know, we go our independent direction.
Yeah.
After our conversation each week, we go in our whatever direction that we go in, and then we reconvene. And somehow there's like an alignment there. There's a parallel in
Yes.
the topics and the themes, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah, well, that is the nature of the electric universe, right? We are, even though we are not verbally communicating, we are always communicating. Every part of us is communicating, and it has nothing to do with distance or location or anything. It's just right. It's the matrix. We don't understand it, but it exists and it's there, just like the electricity, you know, lighting up my light bulb.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's pretty exciting to be thinking at this level, to have I just thought, Greg was looking through these photos and he was able to sort through them. And I probably shouldn't save that, or I don't need these photos of me and my girlfriend or me at the prom, because the point is you're it's limiting. It's energy that's trapped in the past. And then I just thought, what if I could go into this? Because I have this box of photos. I have thousands of slides from expeditions and travels, and then, you know, everything like old passports. I have probably 5 or 6 different old passports. And I thought, what if I could just throw this away? What level of freedom would that provide me? And then that just reminds me of again, of a friend of mine, Jack, who's passed away now, but he was the director of training for a company that I worked with called Sports Mind. And he was a graduate of Yale. He was a colonel in the Marines during the Oliver North era. He worked in the Pentagon. And he was one of those people. He was one of those other fathers in my life.
Yeah.
And one day I was just getting to know him, and we were doing these workshops and things, and I was just coming out of my local co-op, the grocery store, which was a tiny little place, and it was like the hippy dippy place to hang out. And Jack lived up there, and he was an ex-Marine, but he was kind of becoming hippy dippy, right? Like he was a Marine during the 60s when Marines weren't allowed to be, right? Marines weren't really allowed to be, let's say, progressive in their thinking.
Right.
But he was a very progressive, kind of sweet human being. And his experience in the Pentagon and fighting in Vietnam, all of that stuff really fucked him up for it really was. He was doing a lot in his early 50s. He was doing a lot of healing work. So one day I walk out of the co-op, and I see him pulling away in his little Subaru, and I just go, "Hey, Jack, how's it going?" And he just has a shit-eating grin on his face. He's just got a huge grin on his face. And he goes, I'm headed to the Goodwill. And I go, what? And he points to in the back of his Subaru, and it's got his Marine Corps uniforms, all of his medals, everything. He goes, I'm just taking it all to the Goodwill.
Yeah.
And I could feel the freedom, the opening, like he was so joyous, right? Like that and it's not that he was a protester or unpatriotic or anything.
No,
It was
it's just
like that part of his life was done.
I think that, I mean, you know, it's relatable in just clearing clutter or whatever too, right? Like when you get rid of the noise, it gives you a new sense of focus, and letting go of the past or things that remind us of the past, it has to be freeing. And, you know, you look at it in that context as well. it is free, you know, it's freeing to, like, sometimes it's almost scary how freeing it can be. And that can be overwhelming for a lot of people, I think, is that, you know, if you don't have the constraints of some sort of existing framework, you don't know what to do, right? Like where to go next. But that's where it comes back to like that prioritization of what's important, circles way back to a conversation you and I had in 2013. It's that focus on what's important that surfaces the what's next. And like, if you're able to clear away the noise, surface the priorities, somehow that like path becomes illuminated. In, I don't know, I love the clearing of noise. I feel like we have to do it more frequently than I do practice it, but I don't know, I feel like I'm aware of that. Recently aware. We're having connectivity challenges this morning.
Yeah. Oh, you're a little choppy, but you're there.
All right. Anyway, I don't know if that cut off or.
It cut off right at the moment you were talking about, you know, where you turn your attention to and freeing up your life by clearing clutter and
Yeah,
really everything takes up space, right?
Everything, like, exactly. And if we can like let go of the noise that, or even like just like tear down the framework, right? Tear down the framework of what exists in order to like design a new framework. I have to bring up a quote that I used in my coffee doodle this morning because I feel like it's so relevant in such a strange way. But I have to read it, so bear with me for 1 second. So it was a quote from an architect, and it says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete."
Yes. And that
Buckminster Fuller.
Well, Bucky. Oh, wow. That, I think of him, there are giant Buckminster Fuller-ish geodesic domes in just outside of Milwaukee.
Oh, nice.
There's 3 of them. And my pal Julius took me there when we visited him. And when I saw them, the Bucky balls, these giant domes, and they have like a, so it's in Milwaukee, but they have a cactus garden inside of one.
Oh, wow.
So you could be in February, you could be in Milwaukee, and you could walk into this bright, shiny, dry cactus garden.
Huh.
And they've preserved, these are obviously from the late 50s, early 60s. And the moment I saw them, I thought, this is the future we were promised. Right? Buckminster Fuller had it figured out.
And that quote just like came up today. You know, I was kind of searching for, I don't know, like I do these, oops, I hit my microphone. I do these doodles kind of just, I wake up and I have a few doodles. Like I do my doodles on Sunday. I do the drops of coffee. And then I let them dry. And then I have, you know, a set of 5 cards that I look at each shape and I start doodling on it. And then I search how I feel. And then I write, you know, I either look for a quote that is in line with how I'm feeling or write something, usually a little bit of both. And that was the quote that found me today.
Yeah.
So I just think that's so funny. Everything is, the energy's out there, and the things that are starting. Even yesterday I did one about it was more of like a self reminder about not judging. Like it was about not judging. And you know, people will share their idea. It kind of relates to what we were talking about last week. So yesterday's post was about like, you know, somebody might say something and you immediately form a judgment about it, or you form a feeling or whatever. But my reminder to myself yesterday was to let go of that and just listen, think, and seek to understand before you try to attach something to it. And maybe you don't even attach something to it, but just seek understanding, ask more questions, do more learning. and be more curious about things that you think are a certain way. And then that led into today's, which was about letting go of framework, basically. And, if you want to create tomorrow, like let go of yesterday, let go of a framework and start from scratch.
Yep.
I don't know. It's so wild how everything links together in this way.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It made me wonder. It's like you said you look at the doodles and then you kind of look for how you're feeling.
Yeah.
But what if it were you decide how you want to feel, and then you look for evidence in
Okay.
the patterns in the doodles to
So,
support how you feel.
yes. So, and that happened a bit today. And I think below the quote, I wrote like the doodle today is like 97% aspirational and 3% how I actually feel. And, and it was like, but the doodle is very happy and I woke up with some, I don't know, like, so he's not necessarily joyous and blissful, but like as the day has progressed. So I did the doodle at like, I don't know, 6 a.m. this morning. I walked the dog before that. I come back, I do my coffee and my little doodle. And then I went to meet a friend at like 7. And in that conversation was just amazing too. But the doodle, I try to do that to set the tone, like set the intention for the day in a lot of ways. It's like,
Yes.
I search how I'm feeling and do I need to course correct or do I need to ride with it? And so that's like, sometimes I feel great in the morning and sometimes I don't, but I want to. And so our conversations over the course of the weeks that we've been doing this have made me more mindful of the course correction aspect of it, not just accepting what is, but deciding, making the choice.
Right. 17 seconds to change your mind, right?
I love that.
All you've got. That's what you've got.
It's all it takes, though.
Yeah, I mean,
it takes 3.
Yeah, when you're good, because there's no difference, really. There's no difference between 17 seconds and 5 minutes once you've made your mind up.
Yeah.
Because our energetic body will respond instantly. That's what I've learned from biofeedback.
That's so fascinating. And I do find that's, for me, and this has been a couple weeks, I think I did a little study. I did 3 lines and like 2 little eyes and a mouth. And the eyes went this way on one, and then I erased it and the eyes went this way on the other. And it just, those 3 lines, it takes 3 seconds to draw each one. But the feeling that transmits through those 3 little lines, this way versus this way, it's a completely different energy. And I have the ability to put that energy out into the world, whichever one I choose, and, or a variety of everything in between. But I want to choose always to put the positive energy out there because I need it, but I think the world needs it too.
Yeah. Well, it's a testimony to, there are macro expressions and how we also have micro expressions, right? The little moments in between, somebody might be smiling, or you see somebody in the restaurant and when they're walking towards you, they've got a smile, but the moment they turn, there's a different expression of relief or, something else. And we're communicating all the time in so many different dimensions, and it only takes, I love your thing of like 3 seconds because it's 3 lines, right?
Yeah. Bam.
That's it. And all of a sudden the entire energy of what you're communicating has changed.
Yeah. And it just takes that, it takes the mindfulness, but the practice of the mindfulness is what I'm working on personally, right? It's like, yeah, things are going to come up. And I want to address like that this isn't, so I've had some pushback on positivity, that there's a naivety to it. And I'm
What?
like, right? And that's, I'm like,
What?
well, I'm like, well, I can see where you might read that or take that, but it's not a naivety, it's a mindfulness. And I think that it's not like I'm not acknowledging the reality of what's going on in the world. I'm just not allowing it to weigh me down. Yes, I'm aware of it. Yes, I'm acting actively toward my beliefs and what I think is right. But I also need to like provide like I need to provide a source of energy, not only for myself, but anybody that comes into my space, whether that's online or in person. I feel like it's my responsibility. It starts with me. My energy starts with me. And I
Yes.
have a responsibility to put the best energy that I can out. And that's what, like, I want to focus on that. And I don't think that should be misconstrued as a naivety. So like it's interesting that that was brought up because it makes me aware that like, you know, like, okay, you know, like how am I transmitting that energy? Is it naively? Am I glazing
Doesn't
over
matter.
important things? Yeah, it makes me think about it though, you know, it's like,
Yeah. The thing
but
is
go ahead,
they're
go
not,
ahead.
well, they're naive if they don't understand that it actually makes the world better, right?
And like
It's not like you're standing on a pile of turds. Woohoo, ice cream.
yeah, exactly, right? Like there is to me like absolutely I acknowledge it, but then this ties back to what we were talking about with existing framework and trying to start, you know, if we want to build something new, then we might need to like destroy like the negative, right? Like we need to
Well,
we need to quit
you
being
don't even need to
attached.
destroy, you don't even need to destroy, because destroying implies that you have to put energy into,
Right,
right?
which I
Putting
don't want.
energy into breaking something. And this is the other side of the coin, right? It's like, oh, we have to fight for this, right?
Right,
Pushing against something only gets you more of the push against something, right?
right.
It only gets it only gets you more of the fight. The trick, the Aikido move, right? The ultimate martial art is to walk away in another direction, right?
Hey,
It's to actually build on a part of the landscape that doesn't have resistance.
yeah,
And that's the thing about letting go completely is you're not, one, you're not dragging anything along. Two, you're not pushing against something away, pushing away from something to try to get somewhere else. Because the more you push, the more you're energizing whatever you're trying to leave behind you. And that is the, that's one of the tricks in this kind of letting the old framework go, right? And not trying to bring along something that's broken or not current or doesn't isn't beneficial in the most, in all dimensions, or in as many beneficial in as many dimensions as possible, because there's always something more, better, more efficient, more fun, more loving, more interesting, more curious. There's always something more, and and there's an infinite number of ways that we can accomplish those things wherever we want to go. So that's the trick, is to not push away, but to actually let go. And when you truly let go, then you're free to walk forward. And that was Jack in his little Subaru wagon, just with the big grin on his face, like leaving, like all of his medals, right? These are significant. Like he was you know, you and I having military parents, we know,
mhm,
you know the significance of this stuff, the type of and these are ties that bind, right? Semper Fi.
yeah,
You
yep.
know, when once a Marine, always a Marine. And for him to let all of his medals go, his colonel's uniform, all of that stuff, and just give it to the Goodwill. For some kid to probably make new meaning from it, right? Some kid or somebody finds that uniform and then wears it for at Halloween, right?
Yeah, or who knows what, yeah.
Who
That's
knows?
what a
And the
freeing
and the
exercise
medals.
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. I mean, it really, that's a big deal. That's a big act.
Yes. Yeah. He did many big acts before he passed away. And but I think it was, as we've talked, maybe we've talked about that story of him. He died. I saw his. I went to his house. We were going to do a workshop up with a bunch of guys, a men's workshop up in the San Juan Islands. So I went to his house, and his wife was there. And then his daughters were there, and he was upstairs. And I was just going to drop off a check for the workshop. So I hung out for a bit and talked with his wife, and she said, "Oh, Jack's upstairs. He's really sick. He doesn't want to come down." And as I was leaving the house, I heard him just go, I could just hear that from upstairs, from the bedrooms upstairs, like, And as soon as I closed the door, I saw his entire memorial service. The entire memorial service came into my head. And the next morning, my friend Hugo called me up and told me that Jack had passed away in his sleep that night. Just like that. Boom, gone. He was like, I think he was 52. And it was just heartbreaking. I had lost a couple of other friends in that time. Within a year, I'd lost 3 friends. One was 25, another was 40, and Jack was 52. Wow. And I was young. I was in my late 20s. I hadn't experienced, and this Jack was this Marine who I had an extra deep affection for, and also was someone who was one of those other fathers for me, right? He represented that energy of someone who was the equivalent of my dad, the Marine, but the Marine who was loving and generous and exploring those parts of himself and also growing, right? So he was setting a good example for me as an adult, as a man, as a parent, all of these things, because he was divorced and remarried, and he had 2 daughters. So, and I don't even know if my daughter had been born by then or not, but, and probably, yeah, actually my daughter had been born. So there was a lot of chaos in my life.
Yeah.
So Jack, so I see the entire memorial as I'm leaving his house that night. The next morning, my friend Hugo calls. He says, Jack has passed away. And so then I was dealing with these terrors. And I had a friend who was a clairvoyant who would help me out sometimes. Sometimes she would just come over and hang out and just accept that I was in terror, and I was, just filled with existential dread. And there was no cure with it, right? It was just felt like somebody was stabbing me, trying to separate my rib cage from my abdomen. And if I had been in a more conventional, let's say, network of friends and family, I probably would have been in a psych hospital. But fortunately, I had a lot of people around me who accepted weirdness. And so I just called Bridget up after I found out that Jack had died, and I go, do you know anything about my friend Jack? And I knew that she'd never met Jack. I've never spoken about Jack with her, nothing. And she says, well, somebody came to me last night and spoke about you. He said he had something to tell you. and and she said, he had a deep bear of a voice, like very deep, like this kind of voice, and very calm and soothing radio voice. And I go, that's Jack. That's his voice, right? He just had this voice that was very deep and very calming and very authoritative. And she goes, so he came to me and he said to tell you these two things. One, that he was just too tired, meaning that the healing process was too much for him. It was just took too much, like it just was too much. And two, he told me to tell you that you will have other fathers someday.
Oh.
And so that's where the title of these things that I want to write about.
Other
That's
fathers.
when it became clear to me that all of this wanting to have his attention and have the attention of older people was me always wanting to have approval from a father figure. And so that's where all of that became clear to me. And that's when I started to begin to celebrate a lot of my older male friends who had children, and just understand that, wow, these are new frameworks for me, right? Just like this is, I don't need that framework of having, abuse, like being a father who's abusive,
Yep.
verbally abusive, physically abusive. Like that framework doesn't need to be my framework.
Yeah.
Because I am seeing other examples that I really like and that I really enjoy. And I'm seeing older men grow and approach their personal growth in a very methodical and loving way. And it took me a while, because that community that I was in was one of these communities where there was a lot of pushing away and a lot of primal, like primal therapy and screaming and yelling. And the joke was that the therapist isn't happy until the client is angry, right? Because it's like, oh, you need to get into this and you need to feel it. And you need to, you need to feel it, and then you need to communicate with it. And it's like, it took me a while to learn that actually the way to go was to be loving and keep looking forward and letting go, right?
Yeah.
I didn't need to fight with my past. I didn't even need to necessarily explain it or understand it for myself. I just needed to know that it didn't, that framework, which is really the best word for it that we've come up with here, is that framework isn't necessary anymore. It got me to where I was. It got me to the primal screaming. It got me to the crazy therapy modalities. It got me to sitting with the gurus. But in the end, it has to come from us inside, just like you making that decision in the morning and having it be very intentional. There's nothing naive about that, because you are the source of power for creating this. Nobody else. Right? The universe starts with you. It starts with me.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think each of us is responsible for what we contribute, and we can decide. I believe we can decide what it is we put back out there. And there is so much of this going on, that, I just feel like there's so much resistance and fight, that, like you were saying, like maybe fighting isn't the answer. Like, maybe it's like step back and then approach it with understanding and curiosity and listening and love, and try to find the way forward and build the way forward and design the way forward from there, from that place. But it's really there is a, I mean, there's going to be fight, right? Like people are going to have fight, people are going to have anger and hurt and wounds and things that they're in their own spot, about these things. And to just let go of framework is an idea that not everybody's ready for. I can understand that. But yeah, man, if I just feel like we would have more, we would make more progress if we communicated that way. I believe we would make more progress because we're not just coming at people with the big pointy finger all the time. You're wrong, your belief system is wrong and mine is right, and there's no way you're going to convince me. It's just, oh, we get tangled in this circle of counterproductive thinking. It's just,
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's great though. It's like you should have your belief system then and see what it gets you.
Yeah, right. And
Right. How do you want this belief system? Right. It's like most people will never ask themselves, do I even want this belief system?
that's
Right.
the
It's
thing.
like, does this belief system even serve me, that other people are my
Exactly.
enemy?
Right.
Does that serve you?
I think that's the thing that, like, I would love to see more people ask themselves is like, yeah, maybe it is tradition or the way things were or the way it's always been, or whatever we're calling it. But like, have you ever considered letting go of that? Have you ever considered what it might look like to step back from tradition, to step back from what you believe to be true or correct, and question it, poke it with the stick, like learn about
Yeah.
bigger, what's bigger than you and your belief system, what is bigger, and then reassess it, reevaluate.
Yeah. Well, that's very dangerous stuff. And
Oh, it's
not many people are
that's
interested in
unfortunate.
dangerous stuff.
Yeah, it breaks my heart that it's dangerous stuff though, like
Well,
it
because
doesn't
the
have to be.
ego, right? That people believe that they are their beliefs,
Yeah.
and their ego is attached to their beliefs. And if you change the framework, people the belief is that I will be destroyed, right? That's like, changing my beliefs will be the death of me, because I have spent my whole life investing in this, and I am my beliefs, right? I'm an American, right?
Right. And what does that mean? I mean,
I
we've
live
seen.
it. I'm a life coach. I live in a van down by the river. Remember that Saturday
I
Night
do
Live
Saturday
skit
Night
with Chris
Live.
Farley?
Yep. But yeah, I mean, yeah, letting go. I want to let go more and more often, I think, because I find myself in that space all the time. I mean, I do find myself in that space, and I don't like, I don't want to be limited by it. I want to unfold what's possible. And I don't even know
Yes.
what's possible or what I'm capable of unless I like kind of let go of the stuff that's holding me back.
Yeah. Well, and it's not holding you back. It's just sitting there. You're holding on to it. That's the other thing,
See,
right?
that's a great, like, to be able to see that in a different way, to see it, you see it as holding you back than it is. But when you look at it, you reconsider the scenario
Yeah.
entirely. It
Yeah. It's
changes.
our, whether it is conscious, whether it's conscious or not,
Yeah.
that it's not that is holding us back, right? That implies an active agency. That requires agency on the part of the memory or the object, right? Like say we are my past is holding me back. That means that my past somehow has agency, when it really is a fantasy that's just floating out there in a bunch of pictures in my mind, or in a bunch of pictures in a file cabinet, or in a bunch of stories or other belief systems. But what's required for my past to hold me back is, it's actually required that I hold on to it, right? This is the energy component. There is no energy from the past holding onto us. Doesn't exist. That's a fantasy.
Yeah.
It's us holding on to the construct, to the framework, to the image, to the picture, to the creation that is attached to whatever this is in the past that is so-called holding us back. It is us fabricating the memory, fabricating the mental construct and framework, and then attaching meaning to it. That it's important or that it's holding me back. But the point is to let go of all meaning, right? Like and significance for these fantasies of the past. And again, also it's the future. Like you could predict some terrible event for yourself in the future, and it can change the course of your life if you believe in it, right? It's like, think of how many people get cancer diagnoses that say you have 5 months, and then 5 years later, that person is still, running around because they chose not to believe in that diagnosis, right? And so it's the same. The past, our past is some unfavorable diagnoses, or the past could be some very favorable diagnoses, right? Like I could have had a wealthy family. I could have gone to Harvard. I could have had an uncle that invited me to be a junior partner in his hedge fund. And that framework would have taken me somewhere, but in the end, it would still be limiting.
Yeah.
Right? Because what if I were an artist? What if I wanted to be a dentist? What if I were, anything, other than, and again, being a hedge fund manager or being a user experience designer or being a window cleaner, those things have nothing to do with the actual human. That's just what we identify with, right?
Yeah.
It is, all of those things are limiting. All of it is limiting.
It's interesting. I mean, that limiting framework is such an interesting, I don't even know where to draw this out. What I'm thinking, parenting. I'm going to just go straight into parenting with this. I find it fascinating, and it's something I'm acutely aware of, the framework you bring into parenting, because what I'll say, there's no book or there's no instructions, you just figure it out as you go, blah blah blah. But we all bring a framework to parenting with us, and I find it's very interesting because I have 2 daughters who are very different, right? We're all very different individuals, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. And so trying to navigate my way through and let go of framework that, a framework of what I know and what and what I'm trying to figure out and what I'm trying to solve for. It's a constant exercise in letting go of framework. And yet I see so many parents, not that I can say anybody's doing it right or wrong, but that remind me that maybe I'm not, as much as I struggle, maybe I'm doing all right. I know I'm doing the best I can. And I know my kids are going to make mistakes and have challenges. And that doesn't make them bad people, bad choices sometimes, but we all make bad choices at some point. I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to, but I see frameworks. I'd almost rather see my kids make mistakes that are hard to watch them make than to provide a framework of making them a replica of me. I don't want a replica of me. I want them to be.
No, and they would never be, and they couldn't be.
Yeah, but there's such an I see that so frequently. This is how I was raised and I turned out all right kind of mentality, and it drives me crazy. I don't do that, never have done that, but at the same time, trying to navigate your way through Unconstrained, maybe 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 I need more framework in some regard, but
well, that's the thing with kids is because they don't, especially, like preteens and teens,
Yeah.
they don't have the level of moral development necessarily to be able to comprehend how the world is trying to let's say, impose a framework upon them, right? Like,
Yeah.
do your homework, here's a shit pile of homework, do your homework,
Yeah.
right? Like teaching children how to be factory workers, teaching kids how to get mindless things done,
Yeah.
right?
Like this.
Accept things that are, and children inherently know those things, right? That these children know that this stuff is bullshit, but as they get older and the world become the influence of the world becomes stronger, and the influence of their peer groups and their friends, I just want to say before I go further, I'm grateful that I had one daughter, because I didn't have to do so much framework shifting. I just had to shift between my parenting framework and then the examples of the other fathers in my life
Yeah.
who were single dads, and I could look to them. But this kind of the job is to love them as much as possible, and to let go of judgment, and to keep loving them and help them navigate a world that is trying to constrain them.
Yeah.
It's
Man.
just like, like school sucks because it's trying to constrain you,
Yeah.
and right, it's just going to try to constrain you, and it stinks, but it's just part of the world we live in, and your job as a kid is to keep finding things that you enjoy day to day, and I will help you pursue those things that you love,
Yeah.
right, whenever you can. But these things, as you get older, you will have more and more choice, but to know that also you will be potentially more and more influenced by constraints that you might choose to hold on to or not, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing, is the teaching kids initiative and choice is the trickiest thing.
That's it. And
That's so
with
tricky.
choice, with choice, we have productive choice and counterproductive choice. And there's
Well, yeah, for sure. And I don't, maybe productive, is also a limiting word,
it is. And
because
then
kids don't
for
kids shouldn't need to be productive.
but what do they need, and then what is it like, if not like, because there's also good and bad may also be very defined in a way that's not necessarily like helpful.
Well,
um
they do need to understand that society has hard rules for them, and that if
yeah,
we
like
we
there are
live,
laws and there
yeah,
are there are
right, yeah,
consequences for breaking them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so you can choose to break the law,
Right.
or you can choose to not break the law, but you need to that's just that moral development. If we go, uh, if we start, with a toddler's moral development is like a petty despot, right? Like, right up until 3.5, it's just like me, I want to rule the world. Get out of
Yeah.
my way. I don't want that. I want this.
I want
Give
to
me
do it
that.
myself. That was
Yeah.
Zia's line when she
Yeah.
was, yeah.
I'm not coming.
Yep.
Don't go. I don't want to go with you. Don't go.
Oh. Oh man.
But our job is to teach them how to be an adult, right? Like how to be an
Right.
adult.
How to
But
function without us.
yes, yeah, everything from the basics of doing laundry and dishes to how to deal with the jerk at a retail store, right?
Right.
Right, all of those things. But the real the real work is maintaining this innocence and the purity of their little spiritual beings, right? It's like to keep reminding them that they are infinite little spiritual beings that have an innumerable amount of choices to make, and some of those come within an accepted framework of society, and the others are really unlimited, right? It's just like it is. And sure, there are socioeconomic constraints and all of these things, but the teaching someone how to navigate through their own joy and their own intention and their and and having them understand also that feeling bad is also a choice, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's super tricky, but it it is it's so important.
It's funny how kind of like I feel like our conversation kind of often like circles back to topics from the beginning, but we talked about technology and creating, working from an existing framework or creating a new one. And in interface design, something when I was teaching like workshops on how to create interfaces, something I used to always say, like specifically for iOS, for example, if you're going to create an interface for iOS, know the human interface guidelines that Apple provides so that you
Yes.
know where you know what they are, you're familiar with them, but you also know where to break the rules, and where breaking rules is possible. And
Right.
you don't
Or suggestions, right?
exactly.
This is what we know works best so far in the
Right.
simplest manner,
and
right?
and so like, whether this applies to your personal life or parenting, I feel like the same rule or practice kind of applies. And like what I've always said to my kids too, even with like school rules, right? It's like, know the rules so that when you go to break a rule, you're very aware that you have reason for breaking it, that you can back up. Like there's a reason you're breaking the rule. It's not just to break the rule.
Yeah.
And like that you have purpose behind it. And like if you have done that thinking, if you know the rules and you choose to break it, whether it's dress code or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
as it applies to school, they have a framework that they're supposed to work within. And I've always said to my kids, like, if you choose to break it, just have a reason. I will back you if you've done your homework on that part. If you know the rule and you're knowingly breaking it, I will back you if you have reason for that. But if you're just breaking it to be a jerk, then I can't do much to help you. You're breaking an obvious rule, but I have to have clarity and reason behind it. So I don't know. I guess there's something I feel like that we are provided like some sort of framework to operate within, but seeing it gives you also clarity on where you can navigate beyond it. Does that make sense?
Well, and also to know that every framework is arbitrary.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
every framework is arbitrary and agreed upon by one or more people or an entire society. But that framework is entirely arbitrary. There is no there is no God in the universe that says that particular law or that particular, right? There's no overriding authority on all of this. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that again, within certain boundaries, right, of spiritual development, you have the petty despot at 3. There's a certain level of boundaries,
Right.
frameworks that make sense for that 3-year-old, which is
Right.
you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? And then we get to teenagers, and then it's like whatever my peer group is doing, that's the law, right?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
it's cool, like I got to be cool with my friends, and then that's the law. And
Yeah.
then maybe as you get further along into high school or college, then you start to see that there are community laws and that there are societal laws. And then there's a higher level. As we get older, we can see that there are universal laws. And you could call them spiritual laws or whatever it is, but all of it, we are all operating in a field or dimension where all of these frameworks are arbitrary.
Yeah.
All that we know really is that we are energetic beings, and to whatever we turn our energy toward becomes greater. Right? That's the creative impulse and the creative power of being human.
Yeah.
Right? If I turn my mind to wanting to be happy every morning, chances are I will be happier every morning.
It's true. And
right.
pulling in the people who contribute to that and feed and nourish that, which I just feel like it happens. It's amazing how it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I met a really jolly, fun couple this weekend when we were in Leavenworth in Lake Wenatchee in the mountains. My friend Marcus and Chanel got married, so that was one of the other events that happened this weekend. But and you'll love this because we were inner tubing on the Icicle Creek and Wenatchee River. So it's like 80 degrees out, and the river is freezing. The river is freezing. It is. I mean, it is.
Okay,
it is
that doesn't sound amazing.
The river is glacial, right? So as soon as I stick my butt in the inner tube, I am basically, essentially, my ass is totally frozen. But we're in the river, and the two people that I met were like, "Do you know anybody here other than the bride and the groom?" I'm like, "No." I go, "Okay, well, let's hang out because we don't know anybody. So now we know you." And so I kind of enjoyed their company the whole weekend. But we just floated down the river and chatted and laughed, and there was nothing to do but enjoy each other's company. And look at the beautiful mountain scenery and the pine trees and the mountains and
I love that.
And the duckies going along. But it was the perfect metaphor for letting go and going with the flow downstream, right? Like just being on the river, and there's nothing. What was there to attend to? What was there to complain about?
Yep.
Right? There was nothing left. And the river was going to take us where we needed to go. I mean, what better metaphor, right? Like, and then there's somebody to greet us and take care of us and pick up our conveyance, right? Our inner tube. And
that's so cool.
Everything was handled for us. And I just, so I'm excited to see these guys again. They live here in Seattle, and
that's awesome.
He's a tech startup guy, right? And
we know that world.
he's within a year of my age, I think, and so it's fun to meet someone maybe who's in a similar place in life. But that I really enjoyed living the metaphor of literally floating downstream and being in the flow, and then having people there in support of being in the flow and enjoying the moment.
I love that because what a nice little kind of like a pin on so many of the conversations we've had leading to this moment, which is fantastic. I love that. I had a coffee this morning with a woman who I met at a conference we spoke at a few years ago. And she was, an entrepreneur. She is an entrepreneur. She had started one thing, and she's on her third venture right now. And she's just amazing. she's just amazing. I find so much inspiration, and it's funny because I feel like we became friends because she has a personality I don't fully understand, but she's so extroverted and so like just driven and full of amazingness. And I feel like she's so different from me, yet we have a lot of parallels, right? So I'm so fascinated by her that I just can't get enough of trying to understand more about her. And I just love meeting with her. Anyway, today she invited me to a birthday thing that she's putting together. She's like, I've invited like just a few of the people who I feel like I have these kinds of exchanges with, where it's
Yeah.
other entrepreneurial people who have kind of paved their own way. And she's like, you should come. And for me, it's a big internal struggle because I prefer just being home. To be
Yeah.
honest, I like my home space. I don't like group things. Being with other people is hard for me. And I think it would be good for me. And so I'm really trying to get in the headspace of like, you should probably do this. This would probably be good for me, and like do something a little different than what you're used to doing. And
Well, again,
anyway, yeah.
you can let go of all the things you're used to doing.
Yeah, I can. And I'm already trying to gear myself up for doing that.
Well,
It's like,
that's the thing. You don't even need to try. That's the other thing. You don't need to put effort into it.
yeah,
That's the thing about letting go. And this
truly
is,
letting go.
yes, because holding on is the effort.
And that's the
That's
piece
what
that,
makes it that's what makes it uncomfortable, because if you're putting if we put ourselves into a new social situation and we believe we are the person who likes to stay home, and we believe that social situations make us uncomfortable, or I'm not feeling very
right,
social in my life, especially because of the pandemic and all of these things. If I That takes energy to hold on to, and then when an opportunity shows up to be different or to be in a different dimension, it activates, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm somebody who, I don't want to be out. I want to be home. Or it's really hard for me to get off the couch right now. Like for me, it's like, I realize how much effort it takes me
yeah,
to go out and be with other people, but it's because I'm hanging on to this framework
right.
of, I don't have the energy, or I've got too many other things to do, which is almost never true.
Right. Right. That, for me, that's very true. Like that is rarely, I have a couple of things come up
I'll
in
make stuff up.
clusters. Yeah, in clusters, but usually time is not a factor for me in most instances. I have the luxury of the gift of time in most instances. And I worked hard to have the space to work with, and design
Yes.
it how I want it. And
Yeah.
so really it comes down to what I welcome and what I decide I'm going to put into my life or not. And so, yeah, that's really it. But this comes back to like that, just like making a practice, like practicing thinking differently, practicing stepping back and not making a judgment about it, not having an attachment about who I am or what, we talked about that a little bit too. With coaching, people come in saying, I'm an IMFJP or whatever,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
like letting go of those things that I have wrapped around myself in my identity, or for whatever reason. I don't need those descriptors. I can be a different me today and tomorrow and right now and in the next minute and the next. But it does take
Absolutely.
practice. It's like building the muscle.
Well, it just takes letting go.
And that's the thing. It's not a hard thing to do. We make it more complicated, and
Yeah, we do. We do.
it's really interesting, man. I like the reminder though.
Oh, I have so many, that triggers so many stories
I
that
know, right?
of trainings and events that I've been a part of, where I literally watched a woman climb a 20-foot pole and stand up on the top of a wobbling 12-inch disc, and then
Wow.
leap off to a trapeze. Right, we were doing these outward bound type trainings. And then at the end of the day, in the debrief, this woman gets up. She goes, you know, that really wasn't me up there. You know, I'm a mom. I've got some kids, and
Oh,
you know, I'm not really an adventurous person. I'm more of a cake baking person. And I'm like, well, so are you trying to tell us that it wasn't you that climbed up that 20-foot pole and stood up on top of that 12-inch disc and leapt off to the trapeze? Are you trying to tell us that didn't even happen?
and why? Why do you want to just disassociate from something amazing? Like,
Well, because it was a shock. It
is
was a
it?
shock that she didn't because she didn't believe that about herself, right? It stirred up that, you know, all of a sudden it was
Can't
stirring
have
up that
that.
connection between her and the cake baking person, or her and the being the stay-at-home mom kind of person, right? And so it shook that bond. And who would she be if she let go of that?
Yeah,
Very, very dangerous.
yeah.
It's a very dangerous moment for her, and she did her best to justify that who she was valid and important, and that person who was able to climb the pole and leap off to the trapeze was not somebody she wanted to be.
It's interesting to see what we're capable of and then deny it. And then shun it,
Exactly.
you know, like,
That sums it up right there.
wow.
That sums it up in its entirety. It's like we are infinitely creative, infinitely capable, and it's only, again, here we are. It's only by an arbitrary framework that we
That's it.
create that we decide what we are capable of.
I'm writing down the word framework because I just,
That is,
yeah,
framework is the title of this episode.
it
For sure.
definitely is. And with that, I feel like that's such a like perfect spot to be like,
Yeah, because otherwise it's just going to devolve into a whole
I
bunch more
know,
anecdotes and stories.
but I do love the stories and stuff, but this is such a perfect, I love where these conversations go without any idea of what our a theme or unconstrained. We're completely unconstrained, and here we are. And I feel like every week somehow we say exactly what I need to hear to make it to the next week, like to kind of give me something to work on. Like, this is what's happened and this is where I'm going, without really
Yeah.
having, you
Well,
know.
I'm super excited.
And I will get these posted. I promise. I get like 15-minute
Okay.
increments, and then I get sidetracked. And I feel like, I don't know, if I'm ADD and undiagnosed ADD, it's okay. Like, I figure out how to navigate that, but it does take me a while to get to things sometimes.
Well, that's the thing. It's fine. It'll all happen in the right time frame. The point is we are here doing this right now, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is the value, and I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this new person that you met, and that person is pushing your idea of who you might be, especially in a new social situation.
Yeah. Yes. It's a
And
little
the
like,
thing is you don't have to be anyone. You can
yeah.
just go into the situation. You don't have to be anyone. You don't have to do anything or be anything different or project anything new. You just have to be.
Yeah. I've
That's it.
enjoyed those moments. I've had a few of those, and we can talk about those in the future even, but like,
Yeah.
I am finding more of those moments where I just enter the space and exist and see what unfolds, and take it from there, every moment from one to the next, kind of without a
Yeah.
big plan and without a big, structure, or without needing to fill my time looking like I'm busy or being busy. I don't know. I'm enjoying that. I do things when I have things to do, and then when I don't, I kind of am free forming it.
Yeah. Well, I likewise here. So we'll see how sustainable it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big question. How sustainable is it? How long can we keep this up?
Well, that's a good question, because the moment we ask it, there's an answer out
Yeah.
there, right? And then I will ask the question, can we keep it up forever?
Yeah, that's really like, I want to say, I
Because if
think
it
we can
is,
keep this going forever.
yeah,
And what we fill it with, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what we fill it with. We just figure it out as we go. All right,
yeah,
I'm gonna quit talking. Stefan, thank you.
yeah. Thank
Thank you.
you.
It was a very
Another,
energizing conversation.
yeah, for sure. Another amazing moment in the history of the Unconstrained podcast.
I love it.
One of our really our most focused, right? Because everything, it really was all about
Framework,
framework.
unconstrained framework.
Unconstrained, arbitrary and unconstrained.
I love it. I really do. Well, gratitude, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, much appreciation for you and your time here today. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.